was the winter of 2009, deep in the jagged mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Snow crusted the ridgelines, and the air bit into our lungs like broken glass. We were 6 men that night, moving toward a cave system the locals whispered about. They called it the throat of the earth. They swore it swallowed men whole. At first, it was just another mission. Check the tunnels, look for signs of insurgents. But the moment we crossed the entrance, the air shifted. Too still, too cold. My radio crackled with static, even though no one was speaking. Something wasn't right, and deep down we all felt it. Before we start, make sure to hit the subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Now, let me take you inside that cave. I've thought about that night every day since it happened. Afghanistan, 2009. By then, I'd already been in country almost 9 months. You learn to live with the silence, the heat in the day, the bitter cold at night. You learn to read the land. Every rock hides a rifle. Every shadow hides a trap. But the caves, nobody trains you for caves. We'd been stationed at a remote outpost, little more than sandbags, plywood, and a generator that coughed more than it ran. Supply convoys came late, sometimes not at all. Nights were filled with distant gunfire echoing off the mountains. Too far to answer, too close to ignore. Sleep came in fragments, 30 minutes here, an hour there, until your nerves were so frayed you stopped noticing how tired you were. Our squad that winter was 6 men, brothers in the way soldiers become when death hovers close enough to breathe on your neck. There was Hayes, Captain Hayes, our leader, tall, broad-shouldered, quiet until it mattered. He had this way of looking you in the eye, like he could see right past your fear and anchor you in place. He carried himself like a man who'd already made peace with dying, but he refused to let the rest of us think about it. Then Ramirez, oldest among us, pushing 40 but tougher than steel. His knees cracked when he crouched. His beard had gone gray in patches, but he could march circles around men half his age. He carried a photograph of his kids tucked in his chest pocket, worn soft from being folded and unfolded 100 times. Thomas was the youngest, barely 21, wide-eyed, all nerves and questions. He cracked bad jokes to keep his hands from shaking, but he was fast, sharp, and desperate to prove himself. He reminded me of my little brother back home. Johnson was our radio guy, stocky, smart-mouthed, the kind who'd argue about baseball stats in the middle of a firefight just to keep things normal. He said the static in the mountains gave him headaches. Miller dark humor, scar across his cheek from a roadside blast months earlier. He laughed at everything, even when nothing was funny. Some said it was his way of not breaking. And then there was me, the kid in the middle, not the youngest, not the oldest, just another rifleman, just another body to fill a patrol line. I never thought I'd be the one to tell the story. We got the orders late in the day. Intelligence suggested insurgents might be using the cave systems that honeycombed the valley to hide weapons. Our task was simple on paper. Scout, clear, report. We'd done it before. Brush through tunnels, toss a few flares, check for fresh tracks, then call it in. Nothing more. But when the local villager came to warn us, that's when the unease began. He was an old man, skin like leather, his beard tangled in white. He refused to step past the edge of our outpost. He pointed at the mountains and said something through our interpreter. The throat of the earth, the interpreter translated. It takes men. No one returns. We laughed, of course. Soldiers don't have the luxury of superstition. But I caught the look in the old man's eyes. Terror, raw, and unshaken. He wouldn't even look at the ridgeline. He spat in the dust and walked away without another word. That night we packed light. Rifles, flashlights, a few rations, extra batteries. I carried chalk in my pocket to mark the walls, a trick Ramirez swore by. Caves are mazes, he muttered. Never trust them. We left just after sundown, climbing the ridge in silence except for the crunch of snow beneath our boots. The sky stretched wide above us, stars sharp as broken glass, the moon throwing pale light across jagged cliffs. The further we climbed, the quieter it became. No wind, no distant gunfire, not even the howl of dogs from the villages below. Just silence. Too much silence. When we reached the cave mouth, hidden behind a scatter of boulders and brush, We all stopped. The opening was no bigger than a man's shoulders, blacker than night itself. Cold air poured out, damp and heavy, like the exhale of something alive. My skin prickled beneath my gear. "Looks cozy," Johnson muttered, his voice low. He flicked on his flashlight, but the beam seemed swallowed whole. Ramirez shook his head. "Mountains don't breathe, boys. Remember that." We tightened our straps, checked our safeties, and one by one ducked inside. The first steps were slow, crouched, rifles raised. The walls pressed close, jagged stones scraping our sleeves. Water dripped from unseen cracks, each drop echoing like a bullet casing. Our lights cut narrow tunnels through the dark, beams shaking slightly with our breath. After 10 minutes, the daylight behind us was gone. Only blackness ahead, endless blackness. My ears strained for sound, but all I heard was my own heartbeat, too loud, too fast. Thomas tried to break the tension. "So, anyone else feel like we're walking into a horror movie?" Miller chuckled. "Don't flatter yourself. If this was a movie, none of us would make it past the opening credits." Even Hayes cracked a small smile, but it didn't last. The deeper we went, the heavier the air became. Not just colder, heavier, like walking into water. My lungs worked harder with every breath. We found the first clue after 15 minutes. A pair of boots scattered across the floor, leather cracked and split, soles worn smooth, too old to be recent. Nearby, a helmet lay in the dirt, rusted through with a neat hole dead center. Thomas crouched to touch it, then froze. "Sir, this isn't ours." Not modern. He was right. The design was decades old. Russian, maybe. The kind left behind from wars fought long before ours. Johnson exhaled slowly. "Guess someone else heard about this place before we did." Hayes scanned the shadows. His voice was steady but lower than usual. "Eyes sharp. Keep moving." We pressed deeper, the tunnel winding like a serpent, walls narrowing until we had to walk single file. I marked the stone with chalk, white streaks bright against the damp rock. I looked back once, only to find the marks already faint, as if the wall had absorbed them. I told myself it was just the moisture, just the dark playing tricks. But still, I felt the weight of something watching. Not eyes exactly, more like the mountain itself pressing in, testing us, waiting. Ramirez must have felt it too. He muttered under his breath, words I didn't understand, maybe a prayer in Spanish. Hayes didn't stop him. Nobody did. And that was just the beginning. We'd been walking nearly half an hour when the silence shifted. It's hard to explain unless you've been somewhere so quiet that every sound feels magnified. The air in the cave seemed to change pitch, like a low hum beneath the surface. Barely there, but enough to raise every hair on your arms. Johnson tapped his radio. Static hissed, though no one was speaking. "You guys hear that?" We all did. A hum, faint but constant, vibrating through the rock. Hayes raised his fist to halt us, head cocked like he could pinpoint the source. But the sound was everywhere, impossible to trace. The cave felt alive. And that's when the first real fear settled in. We didn't say it out loud. Soldiers don't admit fear until it's chewing on their bones. But as we stood in that narrow tunnel, lights shaking, sweat dripping cold despite the frost outside, we all felt the same thing. This wasn't just rock. It was something else. Something that didn't want us there. And as much as we tried to laugh it off, to press forward like professionals, none of us realized yet just how much the cave had already taken from us. Because the first man to vanish was only minutes away. The hum was still in my ears when it happened. Thomas had been behind me the whole time, flashlight steady, footsteps close. I kept checking over my shoulder, making sure the kid stayed on track. He was nervous, but he followed orders. Then, just like that, he was gone. No warning, no sound. 1 second he was there, his beam of light bouncing across the stone. The next, there was a sharp crack under our boots. The ground shuddered like it had teeth, and the rock beneath Thomas split wide open. "Thomas!" I shouted, lunging back, hand outstretched. His face flashed in the light, wide-eyed, reaching for me. His scream tore through the cave. Then he dropped, vanishing into the dark. The crack sealed almost as fast as it opened. Dust rose. The echo of his voice lingered for half a breath, then nothing. No trace. We froze. All of us. Guns raised like they do any good against stone. Hayes broke the silence first. "Lights down there! Move!" But when we shined our flashlights on the floor, there was no hole anymore. Just solid rock. Jagged, wet, unmoving. Like it had never opened at all. I dropped to my knees, slamming my palm against the stone. He was right here. I saw him fall. Ramirez crouched beside me, running his hand across the floor. His face was pale. No seam, no gap, nothing. Johnson swore under his breath, kicking at the wall. His voice cracked. "Where the hell did he go? Floors don't just eat people." But the floor had. We all saw it. Hayes didn't waste time. He grabbed my shoulder, steady but firm. "We can't stop. If he's alive, we'll find him deeper in. That's an order." I wanted to argue, to scream at him, but part of me knew he was right. The cave wasn't giving Thomas back. Not here. Not now. So we pressed on. We were 5. The silence that followed was worse than any firefight I'd ever been in. At least bullets you can shoot back at. But this was nothing. Just the scrape of our boots, the drip of water, and the pounding of blood in our ears. Nobody spoke for a while. Hayes led, steady and controlled. Ramirez kept scanning the walls, muttering under his breath. Johnson tapped the radio, desperate for a signal through the static. Miller just kept chuckling, low and broken, like his brain was trying to keep him from snapping. I walked in the middle, clutching my rifle too tight, checking every shadow for something that wasn't there. Every step forward felt wrong, like the cave itself wanted us lost. We found the markings not long after. At first, just faint scratches in the rock. Lines and circles, carved deep but worn down by time. Johnson shined his beam over them and frowned. Not Arabic, not Pashto, hell, not even Russian. The walls stretched wide here, giving us room to breathe. The symbols ran in long arcs, circling the tunnel, weaving over and under one another. Ramirez squinted, running his fingers across one carving. Older than dirt, maybe older than this whole damn war. I stared at them, uneasy. They weren't just random. They had patterns like maps or instructions. "Looks like someone wanted to be remembered," Miller muttered, his laugh echoing. "Or maybe someone wanted to leave a warning." No one laughed with him this time. Then Johnson's light flickered, just once at first, a quick stutter. He smacked the flashlight against his palm. It steadied, but seconds later, it blinked out again. "Damn it," he muttered, shaking it harder. "Brand new batteries. This isn't..." The words cut short. He stumbled back, pressing both palms flat against the carvings. His eyes went wide. "Get him!" Hayes barked. We lunged, but before we reached him, the stone gave way. The wall rippled like wet sand, swallowing him up to his elbows, his chest, his face, gone. Just gone. His rifle clattered to the ground, the flashlight still flickering beside it. We stood in shock, breathing hard, staring at the solid wall where Johnson had been a second before. Miller whispered, "What the hell did we just see?" No one answered, because we didn't have one. Hayes picked up Johnson's rifle and slung it over his shoulder. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. "We keep moving. He's not coming back." That was it. No debate, no plan, just forward. Because in that moment, I think Hayes understood what none of us wanted to admit. The cave wasn't just dangerous, it was alive. We were 4. The deeper we went, the more the cave closed in on us. Tunnels narrowed, ceilings dropped low enough we had to crawl. My chalk marks faded behind us, vanishing faster than I could make them. It was like the stone was erasing our way out. Our breath turned shallow, lungs straining with the thick air. Sweat chilled against my skin. Every scrape of knee against rock sent sparks of pain up my legs. We pressed on for what felt like hours. Time stretched, bending in the dark. Then we hit the dead end. The tunnel collapsed ahead of us, boulders wedged tight, dust sifting down with every shift of the stone. No way forward, no way back. For the first time, Hayes hesitated. He set his rifle down, staring at the blockage. His voice was low. "Options?" Ramirez scanned the ceiling. His eyes narrowed. "That rock's ready to come down." Somebody has to hold it if we're going to squeeze through that gap. He pointed at a sliver of space where the ceiling had buckled, a hole barely wide enough for one man at a time. I felt my chest tighten. That's suicide. Ramirez didn't blink. Better than all of us dying here. Before we could stop him, he wedged his rifle under a boulder to brace it. Dust rained down in sheets. He turned back to us with a tired smile. "Tell my kids I didn't quit." The ceiling groaned as he pressed upward with everything he had. Rocks shifted, the narrow gap widening just enough for us to crawl through. Hayes shoved me first. "Go! Move!" We scrambled one by one, jagged stone tearing at our gear. I looked back once, just long enough to see Ramirez's silhouette framed in the dust. His body trembled under the weight, his teeth gritted, his arms straining. The cave gave a final shudder, then it collapsed. The last I saw of Ramirez was stone bearing him whole. We were three. The tunnels twisted after that, turning in on themselves. No matter how many chalk marks I made, we kept circling back. And each time, the marks were gone. Hayes cursed under his breath. "It's like this place is shifting." I didn't argue, because it was. The walls seemed to breathe, the ceilings to pulse. Shadows crawled where our lights didn't reach. Then Miller screamed. I spun, my light catching him thrashing against the wall. At first I thought he was caught on loose wire, some kind of trap, but it wasn't. Barbed wire. Thick, rusted, wrapping around his arms, his chest, his throat, digging deeper with every move. "There's no wire here," I shouted, grabbing at it. My hands tore open as I pulled, but the harder I yanked, the tighter it got. Blood ran across his sleeves, dripping onto the stone. "Shoot it! Cut it off me," he begged, choking on his own voice. We tried. God help me, we tried. But the wire dragged him back, pulling him into the shadows, his screams bouncing down the tunnel until they cut short. Gone. Just gone. We stood there in the silence, panting, bleeding, hands shaking. 3 had entered that cave, and already 4 were gone. It was only me and Hayes now. We were 2. Hayes leaned against the wall, sweat pouring down his face. He locked eyes with me, steady even then. "We don't stop," he said. "We're not dying here." I nodded, but my throat was dry, my flashlight dimming. I wasn't sure I believed him anymore. Still, we moved, one step at a time, deeper into the dark. We kept moving, and the cave moved with us. After Miller was taken, the cave went quiet again. Too quiet, like it had swallowed even the sound of his screams. Only Hayes and I were left, 2 men out of 6. We walked in silence for a long time. My light shook in my hand, weak and fading. Every step sounded too loud, too sharp, echoing back in ways that didn't make sense. Sometimes I thought I heard extra footsteps behind us. I'd spin around, but there was nothing, just shadows pressed tight against the walls. Hayes kept me moving. That's what he did best. He wasn't just leading me forward. He was keeping me from falling apart. His voice came low and steady. "Keep your breathing slow. Don't think about what's behind us. One step. That's all you need to focus on." I did what he said, one step at a time. The tunnel opened up without warning. 1 minute we were crawling through a passage barely wide enough for our shoulders. The next we were standing inside a massive chamber. My beam barely touched the edges. The ceiling rose so high the light never found the top. The air was heavier here, thick like smoke, but without smell. It pressed down on me, made my chest ache. We weren't alone. I knew it before I saw them. Shapes along the walls, piles of gear, bones, rusted metal, dozens of helmets, rotted uniforms, rifles from another war. Soviet, maybe even older. Hayes walked up to one of the piles, crouched down and picked something up. It was a canteen, dented and covered in grime. He turned it over in his hand, then tossed it aside. The sound echoed too long, like it was bouncing around a space bigger than the chamber itself. "They were trapped here," he muttered. "Whole units." I shined my light across the ground and felt my stomach twist. Boots scattered everywhere. Not just 1 or 2, hundreds. Some still tied together like the men inside them had been standing shoulder to shoulder before they fell. It looked like a graveyard. "Why didn't anyone ever find this?" I asked. My voice cracked when I heard it. Hayes didn't answer. He just stared at the walls. That's when I noticed them. More carvings. Not scratches this time, but deep grooves, burned black into the stone. Circles and lines, strange spirals, shapes I couldn't make sense of. They covered every inch of the chamber, like the rock itself had been rewritten. I walked closer, raising my light. The carvings weren't random. They connected, each symbol linked into another, weaving patterns that made my head spin if I looked too long. I heard something then, not a hum this time. A voice. Low, far away, not in English, not in any language I knew. It wasn't coming from Hayes. It wasn't coming from me. It was coming from the carvings. I stumbled back, clutching my rifle. "You hear that?" Hayes turned toward me. His face was pale, but his eyes burned steady. "I hear it." We stood there listening. The whispering grew louder, filling the chamber, bouncing off the stone. It was like 1,000 voices speaking at once, all too quiet to understand, but too many to ignore. My chest tightened. My knees wanted to give. Hayes grabbed my arm. "Don't listen. Keep moving." But it was hard not to. The voices pulled at me, like they were calling my name. We forced ourselves forward, cutting across the chamber. Our lights flickered, fighting the dark. Every few steps I swore I saw figures at the edge of my beam. Men standing in old uniforms, rifles slung, faces hollow and blank. But whenever I turned to look straight at them, there was nothing. Still, the feeling of being surrounded never left. Halfway across, Hayes stopped dead. He aimed his beam high toward the center of the chamber. That's when I saw it. A hole in the ceiling. Not natural, too round, too smooth. Blacker than everything else. And from it, something was hanging. Chains. Thick, rusted chains dangling down into the chamber. At the end of them was, I don't know how to describe it. Not a body, not an animal. A shape, twisted and wrong, like bones tied together in the wrong order. It swayed slightly, though there was no wind. Its shadow stretched across the chamber, far longer than it should have. Hayes lifted his rifle. "Eyes front. Keep moving." We didn't shoot. I don't think a bullet would have mattered. We just kept walking, heads low, trying not to look at it. But as we reached the far wall, I swore I heard it move. The chains clinked, metal scraping against stone. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. On the far side, another tunnel waited, narrow but passable. Hayes shoved me toward it. "Go," he said. "Don't look back." I crawled into the passage, shaking, dragging my gear across jagged stone. Hayes followed close. The chamber behind us faded into dark, but the voices lingered, softer now, echoing through the walls. We pressed on for what felt like forever. The tunnel twisted and dropped, forcing us to crawl on our bellies, scraping elbows and knees raw. My flashlight dimmed to a dying glow. And then it went out, pitch black. I froze. "Hayes, stay calm," he said. His voice was steady, but I heard the strain. He clicked his light on, casting a weak beam ahead. That's when we saw it. The tunnel split into 3 left, right, straight ahead, and the whisper fell silent, like it wanted us to choose wrong. Hayes raised his beam, scanning each passage. His jaw tightened. "It's a maze." I pulled the chalk from my pocket, but when I tried to mark the wall, the chalk crumbled in my hand. The rock wasn't stone anymore. It felt soft, almost warm, like skin. I dropped it, shaking my head. "We'll never find the way out." Hayes turned, grabbed my vest, and forced me to look at him. "Listen to me. We're getting out of here. You keep moving, you keep breathing, and you don't let this place get in your head. You understand?" I nodded, even if I didn't believe it. We chose the middle tunnel. The deeper we went, the stranger things got. The walls seemed to shift around us. Sometimes they pulsed like veins pumping beneath the surface. Sometimes they stretched higher, then narrowed so tight we could barely fit. The air changed too. It smelled metallic, like blood. My tongue burned with every breath. We found more carvings, bigger this time. Circles filled with jagged lines, shapes that almost looked like people. Bodies bent backward, arms twisted, faces stretched into screams. Hayes stopped to study them. Not just markings, rituals. "Rituals?" I asked. He nodded. Somebody used this place a long time ago, and they weren't hiding weapons. His words made my stomach knot, because he was right. This wasn't about war. It was older, darker. I didn't want to know what those rituals were for. We walked for what felt like hours more, maybe days. Time didn't exist down there. My watch had stopped. My head pounded with every heartbeat. Then we saw light, faint, just a glow through a crack ahead. Hope flared in my chest. I stumbled forward, faster now. Hayes grabbed my arm, steadying me, reminding me not to rush. The glow grew brighter, not daylight, too red, too sharp. We reached the crack, peered through, and what we saw, it was another chamber bigger than the first. At the center burned a fire, though there was no wood, no fuel. The flames rose straight from the stone, red and unnatural. Around it were shapes, not living, not dead. Corpses maybe, but still standing, circling the fire in silence. Their uniforms were rotted, their skins stretched thin, their eyes gone. But they moved, swaying with the flames like they were still alive. My stomach turned. I wanted to scream, to run, but my voice locked in my throat. Hayes pulled me back, pressing me against the wall. His whisper was sharp. "Don't let them see you." I nodded, trembling. We waited, minutes, maybe longer, watching the dead sway around the fire, never breaking their circle. Finally, Hayes tugged my vest, pulling me away from the crack. "We're not staying here." Not another second. We turned back into the tunnel, away from the glow. But I knew then, this cave wasn't just a place. It wasn't just stone. It was something else. Something that had been waiting long before we came, and it wasn't done with us yet. We left the red fire behind us, but the images stayed burned in my mind. Those corpses swaying like they still remembered being alive. The way the flames didn't crackle or smoke, just hissed low like a beast sleeping. I couldn't shake the thought. If that was what had become of the soldiers before us, what would we look like if we stayed too long? Hayes pushed us forward. He didn't talk much now, just short commands. Left. Low crawl. Keep your light steady. He was saving his words, saving his breath, but I could see the weight in his face. We were both running out of strength. The tunnel tightened again, pressing us into single file. I crawled first, rocks cutting into my knees. Every few feet, I glanced back to see Hayes close behind. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not his, not mine. Behind us. I froze, heart hammering. Hayes bumped into my boots. "Move!" he whispered. "Something's following," I hissed. We listened. The steps echoed faint, shuffling, like boots dragging over stone. They didn't match our rhythm. They came slow, steady, always just far enough behind that we couldn't see. Hayes squeezed my leg, his way of saying, "Don't stop." So we moved, and the steps followed. The tunnel bent hard right, then dropped into another chamber. Smaller than the others, ceiling low, walls lined with more carvings. Strange spirals and jagged marks that seemed to glow faintly, though there was no light. We paused, crouching in the center. The footsteps had stopped. The silence pressed in, thicker than before. My breath sounded too loud. My light flickered again, weak as a dying candle. "Change your batteries," Hayes ordered. I fumbled, hands shaking as I swapped them out. The beam steadied, bright again. I exhaled hard, relief. But when I turned the light across the chamber, there were figures in the carvings. Not just shapes, faces, dozens of them, burned into the rock. Eyes wide, mouths open, teeth bared in silent screams. Hayes whispered, "They're the missing." I wanted to deny it, but I knew he was right. Those weren't just marks. They were people, trapped, preserved. And then one of the faces blinked. I stumbled back, choking on air. Hayes snapped his rifle up, sweeping the wall. The face didn't move again, but I swear I saw its lips twitch. That's when the chamber shook. A deep rumble rolled through the ground, dust falling from the ceiling. The walls seemed to flex, bending inward like they were breathing. The voices returned, louder than before. Thousands of whispers filling my head, pulling me down to my knees. "Make it stop!" I shouted, clutching my helmet. Hayes hauled me up by my vest. His eyes burned fierce, his jaw tight. Focus on me! Not them, me. I locked on him, forcing myself to breathe. One inhale, one exhale. His grip kept me tethered while the whispers clawed at my skull. The rumble died, the air held its breath. We weren't alone. From the far side of the chamber, the shadows shifted. At first, I thought it was just the flicker of our lights, but then it moved again and again. Something crawled from the darkness. Not a man, not an animal. It was tall, its head scraping the low ceiling, its limbs too long, too thin. Its skin looked like stretched stone, gray and cracked, with carvings etched across its body like the walls themselves. Its face was hollow, no eyes, just a gaping mouth that opened wider and wider until it split its whole skull in two. The whispers grew louder, pouring from that mouth, filling the chamber. I raised my rifle and fired. The muzzle flash lit the chamber for an instant. The bullets ripped into the thing's chest, but instead of blood, dust and stone cracked off it. It didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. Hayes grabbed my shoulder. Move! We sprinted for the nearest tunnel, the thing lurching after us. Its limbs scraped the stone, claws sparking as they dragged along the walls. We dove into the passage, crawling fast, the monster's whispers echoing behind us. The tunnel twisted sharp, dropping us into a slope. We slid on our stomachs, rocks tearing at our gear. The whispers chased us, louder, louder, until they were inside my skull. We crashed into another chamber, sprawling onto the floor. My ribs screamed with pain. Hayes was already up, hauling me to my feet. The chamber was different. There was light, daylight, a faint beam shining through a crack in the ceiling. Hope surged in my chest. I ran toward it, reaching up. The crack was small, too high, but it was real. We can make it, I shouted. Hayes didn't answer. He was staring behind me. I turned. The monster was there, forcing itself through the tunnel, stone cracking as it squeezed in. Its hollow mouth stretched wider, the whispers shaking the air. We fired everything we had. Magazines emptied, brass raining across the floor. Chips of stone flew off its body, but it kept coming, slower, steadier, unstoppable. Climb! Hayes roared. I jumped, clawing at the rock. My fingers slipped, my boots scraped. Oh, but I got a hold and started pulling. The crack was just wide enough for a man to squeeze through. I looked down. Hayes was covering me, rifle steady, firing burst after burst. The thing lurched closer, its claws reaching. Come on, I yelled. He didn't move. His eyes met mine. Calm, certain. You're getting out. Not both of us. No, I screamed, reaching down. But he shoved me with all his strength, forcing me up into the crack. The stone shifted around us, grinding like teeth. Hayes jammed himself into the gap, holding it open with his body. You tell it, he said. You make it out. That's an order. The last I saw of him, the monster's claws wrapped around him, dragging him into the dark. His voice echoed once, then silence. The crack closed behind me. I clawed through the stone, the nub of chalk biting my palm as rock scraped me raw. My chest burned, my arms bled, but I forced myself forward. Then air, cold, clean night air, hit my face. I tumbled out onto the mountainside, gasping, the stars wide above me. My body was broken, my mind shredded, but I was alive. Behind me, the mountain rumbled, settling. No light, no sound, nothing left to show what had happened. Hayes was gone. They were all gone, and I was alone. I staggered down the slope, every step heavier than the last. My legs gave out halfway, but I crawled until the outpost's lights came into view. When I stumbled inside, bloody and half delirious, they swarmed me with questions. What happened? Where was my squad? I told them the truth. They called it a landslide. They wrote reports, put medals on names that would never see them, but they never went back to the cave. They sealed it off, buried it under rubble, pretended it didn't exist. But I know, I saw what was inside, and I'll never forget it. I made it to the wire just before dawn. The sky was a thin gray strip over black mountains. My legs didn't feel like legs anymore. I remember a guard's face going white when he saw me, then hands under my arms, voices, a stretcher, the sharp stink of antiseptic in the aid tent. Someone cut my sleeve and hissed, "Jesus!" I stared at the canvas roof and tried not to hear the mountain breathing. They gave me fluids and something for the pain. A medic asked what happened. I said the cave fell in. He nodded like that made sense. He didn't ask about the others. Not then. He patched me up and let me sleep. When I woke, command was waiting. A captain I didn't know and a guy in plain clothes with a notebook. The plainclothes man talked soft like a teacher. "Take your time. Start at the beginning." So I did. I told them we entered at night. I told them about the cold air pouring out like breath. I told them about boots and a rusted helmet, about the ground opening and then sealing, about the wall swallowing our radio man, about the collapse and the sacrifice, about wire that came from nowhere, about the chamber with chains and the thing that hung there, about voices in the stone, about the red fire and the dead men standing. They wrote, they underlined things. They asked what model flashlight I used, how many seconds between battery failures, where exactly each symbol was, at what depth. They were careful with their words. Not once did they say I was lying, but I could feel what they were really writing: shock, hypoxia, hallucination, stress. The plainclothes man closed his notebook and said, "Thank you. We'll make sure your account is preserved." The way he said preserved made my skin crawl. The captain told me to rest. "We'll handle the notifications," he said, eyes steady. "You don't need to carry that." But I did, I still do. They called it a landslide. That's what went into the report. Unstable rock, probable voids, sudden collapse. Satellite images showed some dust plume at the right hour. It fit enough to be tidy. The cave entrance was sealed with charges 2 days later. I watched from the bunker window as the mountains shook and settled. The dust rose and fell like a slow breath. After that, nobody spoke its nickname again. Not the interpreter, not the old man from the village, not anyone. The throat of the earth was closed, on paper and in stone. The funerals happened fast. Photos, folded flags, the sound of boots on gravel. I stood straight, hands numb, listening to words that floated past me like smoke. Honor, sacrifice, duty. They sounded right. They were true, but they were only part of the truth. The other part was in that cave, behind rock that would not give back what it took. I wrote letters. I kept them simple. No details that would hurt, no lies I couldn't live with. To the oldest man's kids, I wrote, "Your dad held the mountain back with his own hands so we could pass. He was brave. He loved you. He never quit." To the youngest one's mother, I wrote, "He was quick and careful. He followed orders. He was not afraid when it mattered. I signed my name on each, and when I sealed them, I pressed a thumb against the paper." I don't know why. Maybe I wanted something of me to go with the words. For weeks after, I woke to the sound of dripping water that wasn't there. In the shower, the tile felt like it was breathing. In the chow hall, the hum of the generator turned into whispers if I listened too long. I stopped listening. I ate fast. I kept my back to walls that I could see. I didn't like tunnels. I avoided the vehicle bays when the doors were down. One night, our interpreter found me outside, sitting on a sandbag, watching the mountains cut the moon. He didn't come close at first. He just stood with his hands tucked into his sleeves and said, "That place existed before my people came here, before yours. We tell stories about it, but we do not write them." His voice was calm, no fear in it, just fact. "The words on the walls?" I asked. He shrugged. "Not ours. Maybe no one's. Maybe the mountains." He looked at me then. "Some places are hungry. We learn to walk around them." I carried that line with me. Some places are hungry. It made more sense than the official report. It made more sense than my dreams. They sent me to a bigger base for a while. Observation, they called it. I sat with a counselor who asked about sleep, appetite, thoughts of harm. I gave him honest answers. Yes to nightmares, no to the rest. He said it would get better. I nodded. I didn't argue. On the way out, he gave me a small card with a phone number and a line that read, "You are not alone." I put it behind my ID where it stayed until the plastic cracked years later. The plainclothes man showed up once more. Different notebook, same careful voice. He wanted to know if I remembered the carvings in more detail now that I'd had time. He asked me to draw them. I did my best, but the lines slid in my head. Every time I thought I had one circle right, it changed. I ended up with a page of rough spirals and crooked marks. He stared a long time at those poor shapes, then folded the page and slipped it into a file. "This is helpful," he said. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. He left a card too. No phone number, just a seal and a department name. I never called. I kept one thing from that night, a nub of chalk. I found it in my cargo pocket when I finally went through my gear. It had a dent where it must have hit the rock. I should have thrown it out. Instead, I wrapped it in tape so it wouldn't crumble and put it in the top of my footlocker. I still have it. White against black felt, a small piece of a path that could not be marked. When I rotated home, I tried to fit back into the shape of normal life. I got coffee in places with big windows. I took long drives with the radio up just to hear music that didn't echo. For a while, I worked construction, but I quit after 2 weeks because the elevator on a high-rise groaned like the cave did. I took a job with an outdoor shop, fitting boots, fixing zippers, talking about tread patterns. I liked the smell of leather and dust. I liked the way sunlight came through the glass. Every time someone asked about caves, I steered them toward the trail section. Good views, I'd say. Nothing overhead. Some nights were better than others. On the bad ones, I'd wake to feel the mattress pull at me like stone turning soft. I'd hold my breath and wait for the whispering to start. It never did. Not really. But sometimes the air conditioner hummed just wrong, and I'd get up and stand in the doorway, where the hallway met the living room, and remind myself these walls are drywall, not rock. They don't breathe. They don't move. Years passed. Afghanistan changed names on the maps and in the news. People argued on TV about policy, about timelines, about what it all meant. I watched in silence, hands around a mug, and thought of a chamber where time didn't work. I thought of rusted helmets and boots still tied together. I thought of a voice that told me to keep moving. One step, one breath. That part, at least, I could carry. I visited the families when I could. Not all of them. Some wanted space. I understood. For the ones who opened the door, I brought small stories. The way the oldest man called snow lazy rain. The way the kid tucked his gloves under his plate so they'd be warm when we went back out. The way the radio guy argued about baseball like it was a matter of life. I didn't say their names in rooms where the air felt thin. I let the silence hold them up, the way a steady hand holds a picture on a wall. One winter I drove west and stopped at a roadside motel where the ice piled against the door. In the night, the heater made a clank that sounded like chains. I sat up and waited for the second sound, the drag. It didn't come. I lay back down. I stared at the ceiling and made a choice I'd been avoiding. I would go back, not to Afghanistan, to the nearest mountain with a cave the Park Service kept open for tourists. I would walk in with a guide and a group and a map. I would stand in the dark and listen to nothing until nothing sounded like nothing again. I did it in spring. The guide wore a bright vest and told jokes while we walked. Kids shined little headlamps on limestone drips. The air was cool, steady, clean. I stood near the back and let the dark wrap around me like a coat that fit. My heart pounded at first, then it slowed. The guide pointed at formations that took 1,000 years to grow and tapped a metal handrail that rang like a bell. When we turned our lights off for a minute, the dark didn't move. The walls stayed walls. I breathed, in and out. No hum under the skin of the stone, no faces in the rock, just quiet. After that, the bad nights didn't stop, but they changed. When the hum came in the air vent, I turned the fan off and opened a window. When the dreams started, I touched the chalk through the felt and said their names in my head until the sound of them filled the room with company. The hurt stayed, but it sat beside me instead of on top of me. Every year on the date, I hike a local ridge before sunrise. I carry a small thermos and 6 dog tags I bought at a surplus store with no names on them. I know our actual tags are gone, buried with them, or locked in a drawer I'll never open. These are just stand-ins, a way to count. I set them in a line on a flat rock and watch the light take the sky. I don't pray, I don't ask. I just say thank you to the air that doesn't fight me. I never told this story for fame. I never wrote it down for a book. I kept it because I was told to carry it. That was the order. You tell it. For a long time, I thought telling it would make the cave bigger. Now I know it makes the world outside it stronger. Some places are hungry, some places breathe, but they don't get to keep everything. And that brings me to why I'm talking to you now, before I end this the way it should end, with what I learned and what I want you to take with you when you shut this off. I'm older now. The war is behind me, at least on paper. My hair is thinner, my hands ache in the cold, and I don't move as fast as I used to. But that cave has never left me. People ask what sticks with you from war. Some say the firefights, some say the smell of burning, some say the friends you lost. For me, it's stone, just stone. The way it can press close around you, heavy and endless, until you forget what open sky feels like. I still dream of that place. Not every night. Sometimes months go by before it comes back. But when it does, it's always the same. I'm in the chamber with the fire. The dead are swaying, heads tilted, mouths open. The whispers rise and rise until I wake with sweat cold on my skin. But here's the strange thing. I'm not afraid in the dream anymore. Not the way I was then. Now when I wake, I feel steady, like the memory is reminding me of something, that I got out, that I carried their names with me, that I'm still breathing, even when the cave tried to take that away. Sometimes people say, it must have been hard losing them all. They mean well. They can't understand, and I don't want them to. What I tell them is this: it was an honor. I watched men stand against something no training could prepare them for. And they didn't run. They didn't give in. Every one of them gave what they had so another could take one more step. That's what I carry. That's what I'll always carry. I've thought about going back. Not to Afghanistan, I'll never see that place again, but to the mountain where the cave once was. I imagine standing at the base, feeling the wind on my face, seeing only rocks and snow and silence. Part of me wants to prove it's sealed, that it can't hurt anyone else. Another part knows I don't need to. Some doors should stay closed. When I hear about young soldiers now, about their missions and their fears, I wish I could tell them what I learned. Not just about fighting or about loss, but about places. That not every battlefield is made of bullets and bombs. Some are carved into the earth itself, and sometimes the earth doesn't want you back. If there's one truth I've held on to all these years, it's this: we don't get to choose where we're tested. We only get to choose what we do when the testing comes. Hayes chose to hold the gap. Ramirez chose to keep the ceiling up. Miller fought even when wire cut him to pieces. Johnson listened to static until the wall took him. Thomas followed us into the dark with courage no one had a right to expect from someone so young. And me, I chose to remember. That was the order. Tell it, carry it, make sure it lives outside the mountain. So that's what I've done here. If you've listened all the way through, you're part of that now. You've walked a little way into the dark with me. You've heard their story. You've seen what the cave tried to hide. And maybe next time you stand on a ridge or walk under open sky, you'll think of them, just for a moment. That's enough. That's everything. Because as long as someone remembers, the cave didn't win. Don't turn off the light now. If the story chilled you, subscribe to Blackout War Stories. And for more horror, the next nightmares are waiting on your screen.